Hi, everyone. How are we doing this morning? Yay.
Great.
Well, welcome to Life Designed. Our discussion, our roundtable discussion today is on the Great Awakening. Help us make it make sense. So, as coaches and people in the professions we're in, healers, coaches, teachers, consultants, contributors to a Life Designed, we have clients come with us and say, what's going on? Here, I have this thing going on. It doesn't make sense. Can you help me with it? And our sense, I think, collectively is that more of this is going to be happening as time goes on. So maybe we can talk about it. Okay. So now I'm going to go to my fancy slide. Oops, wait a minute. Let's see if I can share this. Okay. Let's see if I can click share. Well, my computer has to respond for me to do that. Okay, share. Okay, green button, I've clicked you.
Technology, it happens every time.
Well,
And
yeah.
I went to the store the other day and they were like, no, you cannot buy this because our computers don't take Apple Pay. And I'm like, I thought I was living in a first world country. When I was in India, they were taking my my other kinds of payment all over the place. And I'm in the United States and you cannot take electronic payment. And I don't have my wallet. So what am I supposed to do? They're like, oh, you can just not buy it. Okay, fine. I'll take it.
They were saying that there were systems down everywhere and they were having to take cash, and now people are not used to taking cash, so that was difficult. So, okay, dun, dun, dun. Let's go back. Let's see. So here's our hero slide that we'll use for our promotion. Make it make sense. And let's see. Let's go to this middle slide. And hopefully Brian will be able to rejoin us. We'll see what happens. Okay, so I just have 3 little statistics I want to share as a jumping off point, and then we can just talk about if we're engaging with people who have questions that might be around the Great Awakening. What do we think that is? You know, how are we working with clients about it? I think we might be in a spiritual renaissance, kind of like the art renaissance that happened. You know, it used to be back in the day that you could only paint what the church approved of. So they were stories from the Bible on the Sistine Chapel, and they need to realistically depict, you know, things that they felt had happened. And then you needed to be a realist. You had to paint an apple on a table that looked like an apple on a table. And then the Impressionists showed up and changed everything. And now you could change, it didn't have to be realistic. And then the abstract artists came in, and now we don't even know what that is. Why is her eye next to her ear? We don't understand what's happening there. So there was kind of a renaissance in art, and I think we might be in a spiritual renaissance right now. Okay, so the 3 statistics I want to share. The first is the TM effect. I don't know if you guys have heard about the TM effect from Transcendental Meditation. So they actually did this study in 1975, just as Maharishi Mahesh Yogi was sort of becoming a global person with Transcendental Meditation, or TM, and he opened centers all over the world. They did a study of 20 US cities in 1975, and they learned that if 1% of the population were meditating. Now they did TM meditation because it was TM that did the study, and that was the only way they could measure how many people have we taught to meditate in this city. If 1% of the population was meditating, violent crime came down. And statistically, they could show the difference. Well, today, the number of meditators in North America is 15%. And so if this effect is true, and I'm guessing that it is, we are all participating kind of in the net beneficial situation our communities are in, because more meditators, you know, generally raises the vibe of everybody. Okay, the next 2 statistics. There are 500,000 Reiki practitioners in North America. It's hard to believe 500,000. They say there's 1 million in the world. And this is a consolidation of people who've certified Reiki practitioners. So obviously there are plenty of that are not certified or practicing in addition to massage or other things. But people doing energy work is much, much bigger than it used to be. And then the last little stat there is that, again, in North America, there are more than 25,000 yoga and or Pilates studios. And so sometimes the first invitation to meditate is the last 10 minutes of a yoga class. And so sometimes that's the way people think, oh, I could be still. I like this part at the end of the yoga class. So I think this is components of, maybe what's happening in a spiritual renaissance or a great awakening. And that's our jumping off point. So thanks for enjoying my slides. And does anybody want to start the discussion about what's going on?
Yeah, I can jump in if my internet's working good. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I've been
get why the getting's good.
fading in and out.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm still here. Let's see if I can get good points. So yeah, I think the spiritual side of the Great Awakening is awesome. I think there's kind of a political side to it. Maybe a side in just changes to even scientific understanding. This might even touch on like aliens. There's more information coming out about UFOs or aliens that's even been done in front of Congress. And us kind of waking up to all these kinds of things in general. A lot of people are waking up to basically the fact that both parties have a lot of corruption in the US. Most governments around the world are corrupt. Kind of there's this whole general trend of people like being more accepting of these ideas, whereas it was crazy. You were laughed off the stage if you even like believed in any of these things, 15 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So I think it's a whole collection of things in many different areas of human life. Someone else wants to jump in.
I'll give a brief description. When I saw that you'd put this as the subject matter, I was like, oh my Lord, how are we going to be able to get through this? Because I'll try and keep this as brief as possible as to what people's own responsibility is. But this is one of those subject matters where I have to like directly quote my master instead of use just my own learned wisdom, because the awakening is so vast and expansive that each one of us has a story more than you've ever even heard before. That's just each individual being. You've never, it's not in the narrative, the things that we've been and the things that we should be and what this all is. And so I'm unraveling my own personal awakening. So I can talk about that, but collectively what's going on is it's a process of karmic resolution. So it's like hundreds of millions of years of timeline wars. And it all came down because it was all about Earth originally, and these timeline wars got so bad that they just spread throughout time, and it becomes so polluted that there was these paradox events and even like universal destruction 4 times. And this is the fifth, what they call the fifth world. You hear that in a lot of other traditions have this idea of the fifth world, and this is because it's the fifth paradox, the 5th time that we've had a reset and had to go through the same sort of journey again. This goes back to the previous civilizations of like Lemuria and Atlantis, and the Kali Yugas and the precession of the equinox, and how the suns rotate through space, and then the raising of consciousness, the lowering of consciousness in a grander cycle. But this is something very more. The Great Awakening is where, it's like if I kill you tomorrow, Myrna, and then you come back to yesterday to kill me, then what's happened there? There's a paradox. And so this was going on en masse, and so the only way to solve it was to create linear time and to create one solar system where all of the biggest polluters of the karmic violations came in. That's planets, which we call celestial sources or celestial beings, all of the beings incarnated in all the various different levels of incarnation. And there were outsiders that saw what was going on, and they came in to get into the process, because there are so many sub-stories. We could talk about this for weeks and weeks and weeks. And they created an incarnation war. So if you came into a solar system and you had DNA relations to it, you could be incarnated on a planet in just micro life or something like that, then mass incarnate and begin the evolutionary process. So this big whole thing was going on of timeline wars, but then also, what's the linguistics here? Incarnation warfare as well. and this big super mess. But it's almost like our solar system is a click, 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 click machine that's leading to resolution for all of this stuff. And when the awakening happens on Earth proper, the other part of our solar system is already in that positive side, because there's two stars that revolve around each other, and what they call the Oort cloud is the other side of that, is these high energies. But it comes down to the consciousness of all the beings within the solar system and where we're at as to how the awakening happens and how we progress. But our own personal responsibility in all of this, which is interesting, it's like a curveball from the creator, is that everything that's going on here is resolution of karma. It's all karmic resolution, and we have our own karmic resolutions to go through. So our own journey into healing, whatever way we choose to do it, whatever expressions we use, when we dedicate ourselves to our own healing and to our own development, we resolve karma, and we don't have to go through so many twists and turns. But as that collectively happens, it has a big effect.
Yeah.
And everything is doing this on its own grand scale. And so the greatest gift that we can give is our own healing.
Yes.
That doesn't matter how you translate the Great Awakening. And there are so many sub-stories to this. It's such a huge subject.
Well, it's funny. I was telling Brian how I wanted to kind of close the show, but now that you've brought it up, is to say we've learned this with like Earth Day, that you're supposed to act locally, recycle your own stuff, and it impacts globally. Like act locally, but have global impact. But when you're doing your own healing, when you meditate at the end of the yoga class, when you get the Reiki healing, when you do your own spiritual journey, you are acting locally, and that healing, it resonates like the TM effect out to everyone.
I have to add something into that though, and a little curveball to that, because what we're missing in the West, and there are lots of traditions, especially if you look at the sort of Eastern Asian traditions and things like that, spiritual hygiene is a part of everything, ritual, and even across China and places like that, they're always offering to the ancestors and having various dances and rituals and ceremonies, and we don't really have that in the West. And so if you're going to get involved in things like group meditations and things like that, if you haven't been trained in the unseen, in maneuvering in the unseen world properly, then everybody that links together at meditation has free reign in the unseen world. It becomes a collective. So anything that's affecting any one of those individuals can then affect any one of the other individuals in that collective, because you give permission through your act of doing it.
Right.
So this is something that we haven't been taught, and this is causing huge problems amongst the community, especially the spiritual community, and creating a lot of division. But it just comes down to people learning how to live a ceremonial life, but just having a daily practice and learning whatever skills it takes them to protect their own hologram. But we don't have that. We think if we go to a group once a week or twice a week that we're doing the work.
Yeah, and I think that being concerned about group situations, group meditations, I completely get that. I think a personal practice of meditation, causes nobody any harm and causes you individual healing. And one of the things I wanted to mention, and as you guys chat about how people approach you about this, something's going on for me, can we make it make sense? Is that there are some people who think about government conspiracy theories, and that's where their awakening started. Can you believe this? I've been doing the research but then in this other part of their life, they're like, leave that alone. I know some of this might not be true about my religion or my friend group or my city, but I can only handle this much change right now. And I'm exploring this. And then I'll come over here when I've got this sorted. They can't change everything all at once. And so sometimes people are waking up around this one thing. They're resolving childhood trauma, or, they're developing a spiritual practice. But don't talk to me about this other thing, because I just can't rock all the boats. I'm rocking this boat right now. So Zian, you're nodding your head. Do you have some thoughts?
Yes, actually. Quick question first for Maddie. When you were in the beginning of what you were saying, did you mention Lemuria before you said Atlantis? Okay,
Yes.
that's what you said. I just wanted to ask that. Yeah, I do have some thoughts. So I never cease to be amazed by the fact that there are just way too many people on this planet who believe that every single thought and feeling, or well, not feelings are always valid, but there's a lot of people who just believe that every single thought and all their thought process and every single rational philosophy or whatever you want to call a thought process or cognition, they think all of that stuff is valid, and they never question the validity of it.
Yep.
Fortunately, because of that, things are going to have to get a lot crazier for most of us to question the foundation of our beliefs and the way that reality seems to be structured in our mind. People just we haven't waken up and gotten and veered away from our illusions of attachment. So it's going to take some really monumental things in order for people to say to themselves, maybe I'm wrong. Well, what if the way I'm looking at reality is distorted? You know, it's going to take some really crazy things to manifest in order for people to get to that point. And that's all I have to say for now.
I know, I appreciate that. I think all of us are awakening in our different categories at our own temperature and timeline. And I encourage, you know, especially since we coach and consult with these people, to give them grace in their own evolutionary process, whatever that looks like for them. They're in their own timeline. They're managing their own digestion of all these changes. I love how Byron Katie says, who would I be without that thought? Because she reminds us that some of what we're thinking is programming. It's not even thinking. We've adopted thoughts of other people and never question it. So she starts with, who would I be without that thought that I'm bad or wrong because of this, or this person is bad or wrong? Who would I be without that thought, as a way to start to pull the thread of examining the thinking? Angela, you want to share with us?
Yeah, I want to jump in. I want to say a couple of things to address something Maddie said, and then something that Zian said too. But starting with Zian, I really agree with you that things have to get sometimes pretty dramatic to come into focus for us. So one time I was like contemplating this. I don't know if I was meditating. I do a lot of walking meditation, angels around me all the time kind of thing, you know, so I don't know, it's all aligned. But the knowing that I got, which was some of us need to be shaken awake and some of us need to be stirred awake. I hate to liken it to a martini, but
like a martini. Are we shaking or are we stirring?
And I've always taken the path, I think, because I had enough conflict that I was not in control of when I was young, that shook me to a point where I got into this, what I often would consider, and I did a heck of a lot of journaling when I was much younger. I up until like 10 years ago, but for me, it was always this radical self-honesty, you know, and not many of us can do a radical self-honesty review. And what I mean by that is, it's not just, why am I doing this? And then I'll spend a little time with it. I'll go talk to a therapist. I'll go talk to a coach, and then I'll get back to my normal life. No, it's, let's do a deep dive, and then let's unwind that and let's let go of it with the intention that it's not going to stick around. I'm questioning this behavior that I'm having, or this coping, or whatever I'm doing. And now I want to shift that, because it's not what I would choose. It's not what I want to choose for myself. So I was always going through this kind of radical self-honesty review. Like, I'd always ask myself, and I sometimes write it in my journal, like, okay, it's time for radical self-honesty. So for me, I consider that more of a stirring awake. You know, it's gradual, it's more gentle, you know, it happens. And you can do it in different areas of your life, like Myrna was talking about. And then there's the shaking. Something dramatic like, oh my gosh, my spouse wants a divorce. I don't want a divorce, but the spouse wants a divorce. And you know, now I've got to examine my life. I've got to shift my life. Or it could be something cool that shakes you awake, like the birth of a child, or getting married, or something that dramatically changes in your life in a good way, or possibly a negative way, that makes you re-examine, what do I want? What do I choose? So of course, you can be shaken awake and then go back to sleep. That can happen, right? So that's the one thing I wanted to mention that I think is definitely the case. And it comes up a lot in the work that I do with people in career transition and job search. Now, Maddie, you said something about how in the West we don't have spiritual hygiene practices. I would say we do, but it's been so corrupted by the power structure that we don't trust them. I was raised Catholic, and there's a lot of cool stuff in Catholicism,
Mhm.
and a lot of cool saints that came out of Catholicism, a lot of mysticism. And
Mhm.
Jesus was one righteous dude, as Ferris Bueller said about Ferris Bueller. But the thing is those power constructs that we have around, we don't trust it. I mean, the historical, record doesn't bear it out, and much of the dogma makes us go, what? I've had many conversations with some others that I know that are recovering Catholics like myself, who would say, yeah, I'm like they make you say the Apostles' Creed during Mass, and I don't believe like part of it. So I just would be quiet during that part and not say it aloud, So there are practices, but we don't necessarily trust them. So I would say, yes, you're right. We don't necessarily prop that up as a way of being. It's not integrated into our culture per se, but there are people who do, and people who do it selectively. Well, they'll say, I'll pick this out of it, but not that out of it. My sister is what she calls a prayer warrior. That's what she calls it. Okay. Myrna, you would call it transcendental meditation, what she's doing, right? But she's a prayer warrior. So she sees something needs to be done, she goes into prayer. And in the monistic and nun tradition of Catholicism and such, that is what you would do. You go into a state of prayer in the hope that you're lifting up humanity. You're putting ripples of transcendental meditation energy, so to speak, into that. So I just wanted to kind of give that perspective. And I do respect quite a bit the shamanistic tradition, because it is definitely, I think, in my roots, even though it's not something that I've actually practiced, as far as in my lifetime, because of all of the other, what's the word I'm looking for? The other things that were, influencing my family and our lives, being in a New Orleans based family, okay, which is very, very heavy Catholic. But there is voodooism, and there's definitely native culture, influencing the traditions, the Creole kind of, Haitian thing that happened. So there's lots of influences going on in the background, and that even that whole gypsy type of thing that is going on there too. So I think we all have our traditions and the way that we might practice our spiritual hygiene. There was a religion class that I took in college one time, because I thought, well, maybe I can get there some intellectual perspective, because I know, Brian, you would appreciate all of the philosophies that I know you've studied. But the teacher, I remember her name was Gail Strickland, and the professor, she went to the front of the board. Back then, we might have had chalkboards in college and not white. And she drew a mountain. Yeah, she drew a mountain, and she said, when you look at the world's religions, you'll see that they all have different paths, but all trying to get to this sense of a divine connection with a God or multi-gods, but it's a divine, goal. But they all are taking different paths up the mountain. And so I loved her class so much that I took her mysticism class because of those concepts. So the point that I'm making, I guess, ultimately is that I think we, in all of our religious upbringing, our traditions, I think we've been able to we've been handed some truths. And the question is whether or not we want to hang on to those or just reject the whole system altogether. And it's tempting to reject the whole system altogether because of the pain.
The reason for that is because the major religions, particularly Christianity, and some of the Abrahamic religions, they are designed to control.
Yes.
Essence of religions comes from teachings, that are based in true love, that are based in truth, and but over years, power corrupts, and there's so much to explain. But the major religions come with certain spiritual contracts. Everything that we do, there are contracts and things that go on in the unseen, and things like the Catholic Church are some of the worst ones. And so,
sorry, Jesus did not mean for us to pull out people's fingernails and put them on.
No. But the way that
he just didn't mean for us to do that to each other.
Yeah. But the way that it is, it's like, it's not, because the normal everyday people are doing good things, right? So
Right.
there's that level of goodness in there, yeah, but it's just the institution itself. And so the problem, the issue is that the churches, they take the responsibility of the ceremony and the ritual away. So they're the ones that say how you can connect to God and the limits of that connection, and you know, it's about that. Whereas, and I don't really like the word shaman, but there's no other word to explain it.
Because it stands for like an intercessory, like you need to have
Yeah,
some middle between you and your connection to your divinity, because
exactly,
they're going to help you translate it or whatever,
Right,
right?
right.
exactly.
Through a priest, a priestess, a shaman.
It's up to us, and everybody that I know that's on their journey, it looks completely different. You know, we're trying to achieve the same things, but because of that karmic resolution process and you know, our personalities, we've all got different paths to walk. But we can totally make up our own traditions, our own ceremonies, our own rituals, our own way to connect with the divine and what it is to heal. And you know, we don't need an intermediary, and that's where, for me, the process has been about removing those contracts, because many of those contracts from religions actually go through multiple lifetimes as well.
Yeah.
And so part of my journey around the ceremonial fire has been piece by piece freeing myself and regaining sovereignty from those contracts that I made in unawareness throughout many lifetimes. So you can find God in religion. You absolutely can find peace, and you can have a good life but there's just, right now, the way the world is, they just control too much. Sorry, Myrna.
No, I really appreciate this. I think there's a spiritual maturity that happens, a kind of spiritual personal accountability that says, I'm in charge of my relationship with the divine. You know, I'm in charge of making my daily activities sacred. You know, just like you're in charge of how your relationships are or the work you do in the world. And it's just more mature. It's not, I go to the building, I sit with the people, I do what I'm told, I leave. You know, if you are maturing in your spiritual growth, you take the reins of that yourself. And then what does that look like for you? I have a question for Jonathan. Okay, I want to bring you into this discussion. So one of the things that I hear from people, whether it's a work situation, a divorce situation, whatever it is I'm working on with a client, is they say, up until now, this has made sense. This marriage made sense, or this job made sense, and it doesn't make sense anymore. So I don't think I was wrong to do it, but it doesn't feel right anymore. And I'm not sure what to do with the fact that it's not right anymore. And I know in your work, you introduce people to their higher self. And so is there a way you can interface with them to say, yes, we can agree that this made sense until it didn't. And now you have to chart a new course. So chime in, Jonathan. What do you think?
Well, it's important in my experience, because that happens all the time. It's a classic, all-time classic. But it's important to make a remark. There is no awakening without a dimension to be having to be awake from.
Oh,
So, there's no such a thing as having to be awake if there's something there underlying that you have to be awake from. So whatever is the dark side of awakening is not bad, because otherwise awakening, in my experience, it wouldn't even be a thing.
Right.
So because
it has to happen.
yeah, so it has to be there in order for us to exist, and it happens every time I'm pretty sure that since the beginning of civilization, it keeps getting better and better, but there's more humans every time. Now there's billions. Before, there used to be only like a couple 100,000 maximum. So now there's like billions of humans. So of course there is other, like many layers of dimensions that we have to be awakened from, but they are still there for a reason. So without that dimension, there will be nothing to be awake from. So I think it's a beautiful dance. I like it. I don't see it as evil per se. It's not like an evil thing, but it does exist. I cannot not notice that it's there, and it's great, because once you awake, that's when humans come with these kinds of struggles, because now they know, okay, before I didn't feel this way. My work was the best job ever, but now it just doesn't make sense. And it's not about like the money, because some of them earn like huge amounts, Some of them, they do it because of that, and they become aware. It happens. It's all different realms. Some of them have different reasons. So let's say someone comes to me and they're like, hey, it's not working. Relationships, for example, that's a classic. Like, it was, at the time, it was such a great match. Like, the day we got married, it was like amazing. But then the next day, I woke up, like, I woke up after the wedding, and I was like, what the fuck did I just did? And I'm like, yes, that's an awakening. You just
Or
woke
20
up to
years
the
later.
reality.
20
Yes,
years
or
later, you know?
exactly. Sometimes it's the next day. I have seen that. Or sometimes it's 20, 30 years later. So I would say every time you have to take them, you have to like connect with them and see what is it exactly that they're like, because sometimes they are the ones that grow, and sometimes is just like a not like a match. Sometimes the other person, if it's a relationship, sometimes the other person
grows.
was awoke. Let's say somebody else, it's like, oh, I'm eating animals, and animals are not supposed to be like inside of my body, but I still like them. And then the other person is like, yeah, I know they taste so delicious, but like, I just don't want to eat them anymore. So somebody starts like, it's not a bad thing, but it's just like they start separating because of the levels of like vibration. And that can be when hypnotherapy comes into play, is okay, fine, you want to get rid of like those old beliefs, so we can just what I will do is create an anchor, so that human gets in touch with the feeling of like, oh, this is how it feels like when I'm in my center. So then whenever they are experiencing and not matching experience when it comes to their reality, then they can just completely ignore it, and knowing that it's coming from an old belief that is just holding them back. It's not themselves now. It was them in the past, yes, but it's not them anymore, and it doesn't have to be. So that's what I would.
No, I
how
appreciate
it goes.
that, Jonathan. I want to invite Maddie to mention this concept of being sacredly neutral, because I think if we can invite people that are being forced into change, whether they've come about it slowly because they're being stirred, or whether they've been shaken, the people at work that they don't want to be around anymore haven't suddenly become bad people. They're just not a match anymore. And so, or if there's a marriage that's dissolving and it worked for 25 years, it worked for 25 years. Yay. We can't seem to make it work going forward. How can you be in a sacred, neutral place, face whatever this reality is, and the other person is okay, and I'm okay, and we're just moving in different directions? How do you develop that sacred neutrality, Maddie?
Well, sacred neutrality, like, sometimes doesn't mean that you have to agree. That doesn't mean that you come
No,
to a
you can
resolution.
disagree.
But yeah, but you know, the awakening itself is not a mass thing. It's not something that all of a sudden just happens to the whole population. We all go through it one by one through our own efforts, and there'll be a groundswell of it. And when it becomes fashionable, almost, you know, the noise that's being made by the powers that used to be in the background just won't be drowning out this other thing that everyone can feel is going on, that feels good. You know, but the awakening is happening in the dream time. It's going to be a dream time event, you know, and there's lots to the awakening that people just don't understand. But within our own personal holograms, where it comes to, sorry, what was the question? What was the key
About
part?
how to stay neutral,
Sacred neutrality,
agree to disagree. Like, you're going to go your way, I'm going to go mine, but we're both okay.
Sacred neutrality is that when you understand the difference between karmas and dharmas, between generating more karma, so making an action that will step on somebody or even yourself, just even in the slightest way, you create a karma, as opposed to a dharma where you learn and you say, do you know what, I'm not going to do that, I'm making a different choice. I've learned that wisdom, and I'll make my action turn knowledge into wisdom. You know, I've learned that fact. And so we begin to make those changes, and the only way you can progress and actually and get anywhere with that ethos is to be sacred neutral, because you understand that there is nothing out there that's against you. You're not a victim of anything. You may be in certain circumstances, but they're there for you to find your way out of. And like Angela was talking about earlier, with the different types of experience of you know, how it happens, and many of us, we experience the kicks up the arse, but then also the gentle stroking, and you know, because, and we call these forced evolutions. There's certain points where you can't go any further in your hologram, in your algorithm, until you go through a certain experience, and sometimes if the universe has to go, right, have it, then it's always traumatic, you know. But we have many opportunities to learn and grow, and so once we remove the idea that we are being victimized by the universe in any way, shape, or form, then everything is our responsibility. And then when we accept that, every word, every thought, every deed is your responsibility, and that's the only way you're going to get where it is you need to go or you want to go. And so when you understand that, sacred neutrality becomes obvious.
Yeah.
But like with everything, it's always a journey and not an event. You can't wake up tomorrow and decide that you've just cracked that one because you know it. Action turns knowledge into wisdom, and it takes repetition over a long time to master any of these kind of skills. But it's like it's a like a stream entry, you know.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to mention something Brian said, Myrna, if it's okay, about and because I know there's the individual awakening, and that is where it all happens. And I'm all about the individual part of this, and for the most part, don't want to play in the big global fields of things or care about what one political system is doing or not. Not because I'm apathetic, but just because that's just not my role in this life. It's just not my thing that I'm here to do. But I do want to validate what you mentioned, Brian, about the fact that we can have some large systemic awakenings that happen, because it's not just personally in our own life, like the divorce or the death of a loved one or the birth of a loved one or whatever, but it could be the corruption of a system coming to light, or the fact that we're not the only, beings that exist multidimensionally in the universe, we're not alone here or whatever. So there could be those things that happen on a collective basis that can create the groups of us waking up together to maybe then we go to a sacred neutral together, right? Or we go to a transcendental meditation thing together, right? Where we say, we're choosing this instead because we don't want that system. It's not what we want. So I just thought I would kind of circle back to what you said, Brian, because that's where we got this whole buzzword around the Great Awakening. Even though it's spiritual, we look at it through these egoic mental realm eyes, and we want to say it's this political system and it's that institution, and you know what I'm saying? So
yeah, I think there is definitely a strong collective element to it. Without getting too crazy into stuff, I think once people realize that taxes are primarily used to fund nefarious activities, in my opinion, that's what's going on. And that's going on all around the world. As people wake up and realize, like, we've been participating in our own destruction, like we pay for them to go create wars that are totally unnecessary. We pay for them to allow poisons in our food. Like, we're paying them to poison us. So, I mean, once people realize we're participants in this, nobody has stepped up, had the courage to say, no, we're not going to pay. Only if, like, you're going to do things that support society are we going to pay. Like, we really haven't had that kind of an awakening. There isn't like a resistance to this, kind of thing on the physical level. I think for humanity, it's going to have to be more of a consciousness awakening, whatever forms that comes in. It could be dreams, like Maddie's saying. It could be, to some extent, like a lot of people that are really like arguing for the Great Awakening, especially if they're into like the alien side of it. They want like disclosure. Let's get full disclosure.
Yeah.
But what's kind of funny to me is I don't even think that matters, because we've literally already had disclosure on the information level. Like, literally, this was one of the most shocking things to me. I really shouldn't have been surprised at all, but like, people have gone before Congress who worked for government, like 3-letter agencies, and they've said, okay, we're letting you know, many of these 3-letter agencies like CIA, DOJ, other ones we don't even know the names of, have been like directly working with aliens, or like, we have recovered craft that's not human made. This made the news and no one cared. Like, literally, literally, like, no one, most people just did not care. So information might not even be good enough to wake people up at this point. they might actually have to have some kind of consciousness awakening experience.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I actually think I've talked with Jonathan about this a little bit when we were in India. I think people are somewhat still in a state of hypnosis or in a trance. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Jonathan, but we had a conversation, I remember, where you were saying you see elements of hypnosis in society. Like there's elements of hypnosis in advertising. There's elements of hypnosis in the news. There's elements of hypnosis in people are literally hypnotized into a state where giving them the information will not wake them up. In the same way, like if you hypnotize someone to be a chicken and then you put a mirror in front of them, you say, okay, you see you're a human, right? They go, bark, 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 bark. Like they still don't see it, even if you put the mirror right in front of them. We can tell people there's aliens, there's a huge galaxy out there. We're not the most intelligent race that's ever lived. Like you can show people the mirror and they're like, nah, I don't believe it.
Because it's the mental realm to the mental realm. It's not a spirit or the feeling realm. It's not it needs to be a spiritual awakening that we call that. It's not a mental awakening at all.
It's exactly like the information. There's like information immunity now because of like how much we've been like MK Ultra and like hypnotized, which is real. MK Ultra is real. The CIA admitted that. They also admitted they've been using those principles on the American public.
Right.
Most people don't seem to care. That's a big deal. But so people are like immune to this information. So maybe there has to be information coming through dreams and people intuitively realize it's true, or other like forms of like waking people up to like, we have to get to some form of harmonious society.
Yes.
Where we're not paying for our own destruction. Yeah, we can't be paying for our own destruction. We can't be paying for wars that creates intentional suffering.
This comes down to tacit consent, Brian.
Go ahead, Danny.
Tacit consent, which is this is my camera's just, I knocked it and it's gone off, so I'll have to come out of the room and come back in to get it working. I do apologize.
No worries.
Okay, it's fine.
This is where collectively we do have to play our part, because there will come a point where there's a groundswell of things, and the fact is that all of these choices that you're like the ones you're just describing is all tacit consent. There's more of us and less of them. They do hold certain very nefarious hands, but you know, if we just say no, tacit consent is, if we don't say no, then it's a yes. And they just keep taking tacit consent because of the way they create the laws. There will come a point where people learn that they have a choice.
Yes.
And you know, but there has to be a groundswell first of other incidents. But it's more like local bubbles will come together and do good things. And then these local bubbles will then create larger bubbles, and then larger bubbles, and then you'll see certain themes and communities beginning to, because people who were brought up in the religion their whole life are not going to be able to go straight away and become hippies in a van digging for vegetables, right? You know, so you know, there has to be ways we have to learn how to communicate with one another, how to actually learn to you know, bridge science and spirituality together, and break the boundaries of these perceived you're right, I'm wrong. This is the great journey of humanity into unity consciousness, but we have to do it ourselves. It won't just happen like in a flashbang of life.
So
you know,
Jonathan, you got something. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, related to humans being in a state of hypnosis, it's like a dirty word, hypnosis. Everybody that is not familiar with it, whenever I ask, the first thing they think is like a stage hypnosis, which is, it exists. It's a thing, like making someone into a chicken, or making someone forget their name. And now you're, oh, what's your name? Oh, Sandra. Well, now you're calling Flavia. Like, okay, my name is Flavia now. Like, you can do so many things, but that's nonsense. Still happening. Now, if you have to the point that Matthew was talking about, and the masses of humans, let's say you have an army of, instead of actual warriors, you have an army of sheep, and you have 10,000 billions of, your army is so huge, but then you face a 100-person army with like the movie 300.
Yeah.
That's the result. That's what we are experiencing. We have
That's a
billions
good
of
point.
humans, and everybody says, yeah, we are so many. And I'm like, no, you don't get it. There's not as many as you think, because there's not even close.
Awakening is not achieved through
It's
fear. It's not a fear thing. It's never going to happen through fear. So the information comes out and it isn't digested. Well, I'd actually rather them stay awake, stay asleep, than to be going into a fear state, because then
Freaked
that
out. Yeah.
really is not, that's detrimental to
Well,
all of the work that those of
and
us have been
and also
reading,
for
you know?
the information thing, which we are in the era of information, but information and knowledge, it's not power. Information and knowledge is just like toilet paper without having to take a shit. It's useless.
Yeah.
So information and knowledge, it's only powerful when you actually make it into like a concrete plan and you actually purposefully use it. Otherwise, it's completely useless. You can have all the information on the planet, you can have the whole library, like the US library, in your house, but if you don't read it and actually like purposefully use it and consciously making some actions backing up the fact that you know something, it's completely useless. So you can watch all the videos that you want on the internet. You might even be watching this and be like, oh yeah, no, I get the point, I'm awake now. But if you don't make any actions, you're still the same. So you better make some actions to back up the fact that you are now armed with the power of knowledge. It's important. So
I appreciate
yes,
that. Yeah.
it is important also to know that hypnosis is just a mental state. It's just like it's just a layer of all the layers that we have. It's just a mental state, and you can be in and out of it at many times during the day. So whenever you're watching a movie, you're in a state of, you're susceptible. So that means you are being hypnotized willingly, because you are willingly watching something that somebody else created so that you enjoy, and that's fine. But it's good to know that you are actually willingly opening yourself that dimension, and it's enjoyable. I mean, I enjoy movies sometimes, so it's but that's how it goes.
Have
So
anybody read the book Illusions by Richard Bach? Have you ever read Illusions by Richard Bach?
Yes.
There's a wonderful scene there where, by the way, the subtitle is The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. So in there, the master and the student, it's a spiritual journey that this man is going through. He goes to the movies and they're watching a retrospective, like at, the old movie theater where they show old movies, right? And they put them on the big screen and you get to watch them. And they're watching Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And even though this gentleman has seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, he's immersed in the movie. He's caught up in the movie, in the darkened theater, his attention on the screen. And his teacher, Don Shimoda, nudges him and says, let's get out of here before the movie is done. Like they're at the almost climactic scene in the third act. And he says, let's get out of here. He's like, no, Don, I want to watch the end. Like, shh, like this. And he wants to watch the end. Then he gets to the end and they get out of the movie theater. They're walking down the street and he turns to him and he says, Don, were you trying to teach me something? Like, why would you interrupt me? I was so irritated with you. He says, yeah, what do you think I was trying to tell you? That, life is like a movie and we get immersed in it and it's like an illusion we live in, and oh my gosh, some people pick horror movies to live in and some people pick comedies to live in, and there's this ups and downs and tragedies, and we get so when you mention, Jonathan, about we get into the movie and we get hypnotized. Well, welcome to life. That was the metaphor for what Don Shimoda was trying to teach his student, Richard Bach, in this book. So I love that you bring that up, because we can do that. But how does a conscious person watch a movie? A conscious person who's more awake, right, than hypnotized. Maybe they're not fully awake, but they're more awake than hypnotized. They're seeing through it, right? And they're very aware that they're actually putting themselves into this, watching a movie, right? I'm opening myself to this. I will watch like shows sometimes that have commercials, which is rare these days, but sometimes if you watch something as a commercial, and then the drug commercial comes on where they're promoting a pharmaceutical.
I know.
like, okay, are you trying to hypnotize me into getting this illness so I then can go to my doctor and say, I want this drug? I click mute this because I'm consciously viewing something and I know what's going on, right? And so I love that you bring that up, Jonathan, about the fact that when we get into media, we're willingly entering into this, you know, hey, here's the hypnosis.
Media, and when you're born up to the point that you're like 8 or 9, that can be like, there's no, doesn't have to be specific, but like up to the point that you're certain age, every single comment that some of those geniuses around you are feeding you, and we know how their life goes, it's all crap. And it's all going into your subconscious mind, because at that point you have no choice. You cannot accept or reject. Now you have this cortex, they call it, the scientists, the cortex part of your brain. Now you can select, okay, consciously you can choose, this idea doesn't serve me. But up to a certain age, that area of your brain was not even a thing. So all the nonsense that you were listening to, even the songs you were listening to, the feelings that you were familiar with, because there's a lot of feelings. That's why so many people are addicted to toxic relationships, because for them it's so delicious. Like deep down, they enjoy it. Otherwise, they cannot have. They will not enjoy a relationship, because they have to have that familiar feeling of anxiety, fear, mystery. Like, what if he or she leaves me tomorrow? Like, is it gonna happen? Like, and they're addicted to those feelings, and it was there for a long time, and it comes back to, it's an awakening. For everybody is different, everybody has their time, but the sooner the better, because it's more enjoyable. It's like watching a movie after you went to the Universal Studios. You know how the shark goes out, and like,
I
it
thought
looks
it
so
was a real
fake.
shark. It's a
But
mechanical shark.
exactly, when I was a
How the
kid, I
magic
was terrified by that huge shark. I was terrified. And then you go and you see, oh, this is how they do it.
The movie magic.
The magic.
Zian, I want to bring you in and then we can do our final. So please, Zian, your comments.
Thank you. I've been waiting to get this off my chest. I actually want to go back to the intersection of what Angela said and you said. She talked about how, radical honesty isn't something that you do once in a while. It's not something you do when you feel like it. It's a consistent practice. And if you're not being consistent with it, it's a muscle. It's a cognitive muscle mostly, and there is some feeling and intuition involved with it, depending on where you're at in your state of consciousness. And if you're not using that muscle constantly, it degrades over time. It's not strong over time. It may not necessarily weaken. I guess it could, but it doesn't. You don't maintain the flexibility and the strength of that muscle if you're not consistently using it. And so there's a lot of people that I find, from my experience, they call themselves spiritual, but only when it benefits them. They don't actually engage in any shadow work. They don't engage in reflection. And if they do, it's rather surface level. It's not at the depth that I do. It doesn't conform to my standard of deep, critical self-analysis. But then there's the line between that, being consistent with your self-transparency and what you said about how much change and healing and self-evaluation can I do before I can't handle anymore and it's overwhelming. So there's a fine line between those two things. But yeah, I really like where all this is going. We're generating some great and some great topics and thoughts going on here.
Right. And then just to segue back to what Maddie was saying about having a spiritual practice or spiritual hygiene. Well, for me, 20 years of doing Julia Cameron's suggestion of morning pages, where every morning you journal for 3 pages. And what pours out of you is something that is somewhat intuitive. And then before you know it, by the time you get to the third page, you've had your truth. You got into your radical, self-honest. Well, this is what the heck is really going on with me. This is what's really where I am right now. And so that practice gets to a point. And I just put a bookmark in this, Myrna, because I think it would be really cool to do a roundtable discussion around spiritual hygienic practices or spiritual practices. As you evolve, how do they evolve? Because
Yes.
20 years of doing that, it no longer serves me to sit down and do a self-analysis. I have arrived at such a smooth, intuitive attunement with myself that I don't want to go to the mental realm and break everything down. I have resolved so many contracts. I have healed ancestral stuff. I've done so much of that work, and I've had the delight of, for the past 15 something years, being a nurturing partner with Myrna, which we don't coach each other, but it's sort of kind of like that, right? So you know what I'm saying? So I've had assistance, but I've also done a lot of the work. And to me, awakening can be stirred awake like that, or you can shake it awake, but then what do you do with it? And this great group of folks that you guys are doing all these different modalities can really help people who are in that, like, now what do I do with this? I'm awakening. Now what do I do with this? So
I appreciate that. Let's do our final kind of round robin, share how people can get a hold of you. The last thing I want to mention is I was just listening to a woman who was explaining when she was a young psychic. She was born with a ton of gifts. She didn't know what to do with them. She finally figured out, this is how I'll help people. She's doing readings. She's 20 years old. She had a few sessions where the client broke down in tears, and she had no idea what to do with that. Like she said, this is what I see about this problem. And she said, I gave her a clear vision, but the person sort of cracked up in front of me. And she's like, I didn't know what to do about that. Like, I only knew the psychic part. I didn't know the part about how to help them digest or manage the information they asked me for. You know, it's like I was the steamroller that just drove over them, and now they're sobbing in front of me. What do I do with that? So I think as we've matured, you know, as coaches, as healers, as consultants, is we take the temperature of the person sitting across from us, and we have the grace to say, and this is how I think I can help you. How are you doing? You know, do we want to do some of this now, and then we'll pick it back up when you're ready? In the beginning, I wanted to drag people across the finish line. Didn't you say you wanted to go to the finish line? Let's go. Come on. The finish line's right there. I'm going to drag you across it. Let's go. They're like, wait, maybe I know I said that's what I wanted. Maybe I'm not quite ready. So, Zian, if you want to share how people get a hold of you, and then what you can do for them if the world isn't quite making sense and things are changing for them, please go ahead.
Yeah. So my handle for all my social medias is Heavenly Wisdom Coaching. There's usually a dash in between Heavenly Wisdom and Coaching. You can get a hold of me through Gmail at HeavenlyWisdom.Coaching@gmail.com.
Great.
And
We'll
what
put
I
that
do
in the description below so we can get hold of you.
Yeah. Okay. What I do is I offer them a lot of what is used in therapy, not cognitive behavioral therapy. I find that cognitive behavioral therapy is too clinical. There's not enough somatics that go on. So I use a combination of somatic experiencing, and I shine a light on what people have pushed into the shadows and swept under the rug for so many years. They talk about their experiences and what they're dealing with, and then I give them feedback, and normally it resonates with them, and they say, oh yeah, that makes sense, that they connect with the feedback that I give them. And sometimes it might take a minute or two before I fully understand what they're saying, and then I'm able to give them precise feedback, but I'm like always on the mark at some point. So I will gain context and insight into their behavior. I help them shift into new patterns gradually. Sometimes it's sudden, sometimes that shift is gradual. It just depends on what this person is ready for and what their nervous system can handle. And I help them shift their consciousness in some way.
Great. Good. Thank you so much. How about for you, Jonathan? How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, I don't want to get political here, but I remember something Brian said. It's important because when I came to this country, I thought like, oh, they were saying democracy and stuff, and then I said, you have two options. What is this? This doesn't sound like democracy. What if the first option is not so good, and then the second option is also not pleasant? Like, you just this? I was like, you guys have to choose like the least worst.
Yes.
So
Yeah. The
it is
lesser of two
important.
evils. Yes.
And they're all
Yeah, it
they're all
is.
the same people in the end anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
So it is important that because it comes back to awakening. So once you awake yourself to like, oh, I thought I was living in this kind of, because the way I see it, American people live in a bubble. They always thought like they are born here. They look around and they think, oh, I live in a democratic place. And then I come from the outside. I'm like, how can I explain it to you? Not really. So it is good. They have to question, and the more they question, I would suggest, if you're just starting, just don't both. That's the first thing I
Oh,
would do.
well, people get a hold of you on Instagram if they want to talk to you personally.
Yes, they can do JonathanRCoaching or JonathanRCoaching at gmail.com.
Okay.
As of now, that's how they can get a hold of me, or the website, a life design.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That's
A
pretty
little
much
plug
it.
there, alifedesign.org. So
It's actually, there's a link for a lifedesign.org on my Instagram, so it's easy to just go there and then
very
just
good.
click on it.
Okay, so Maddie, tell us about people get a hold of you on your website, and you have courses there as well.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to get hold of me, go to newera.org.uk, put a link below, and you'll see my services there. A few things for you to flick through and listen to, and then some details if you wish to get hold of me. I do private sessions. I'm a psychic healer, and I do a few other things, coaching stuff, but I kind of squeeze it all together. So there's nothing we can't discuss, no issues we can't get to the bottom of, and yeah, just go onto the website and send me an email.
No, very good. How about for you, Brian? How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, just through alifedesign.org is good. And I teach people Sedona method, which is a way to release stuck emotions. There's some different things we can do with that. I'll also teach people some manifestation practices if they want, because everyone can manifest. It is something real you can do, and it does work. Yeah, so that's for me.
Oh, very good. Well, I'll put your email down too at A Life Designed, so people can get a hold of you there. And Angela, you do so much wonderful 3D work where you let people bring themselves to their work. And I know you've had a few conversations that's like, my workplace doesn't make sense. What happened? How did they get a hold of you?
Well, a lot of times people will reach out because they're dissatisfied with their job or their career, and so they're wanting to put together the strategy to move forward. And so I'm pretty pragmatic in helping them with their resume, CV, and getting that together so that they can understand how to like figure out what they really offer and what they really want to offer moving forward, and how to position that and put that out there. So that's really kind of what I do as far as the front facing I do with people. Behind the scenes, I'm helping with A Life Designed and making sure that all these courses and membership community works. And I'm excited about the team coaching you guys offer, even though I'm not a coach. I'm really a resume writer and a consultant. That's what I usually do, but still career does have a big portion of our life and what we're doing. And lots of awakenings can happen through the career process. So if you want to talk the woo-woo with me, it's not going to be through my company, NSYNC Resources. It's going to be through A Life Designed that I can talk the woo-woo with you. And I'm happy to talk the woo-woo with you. And sometimes I have clients who will call me and talk to me and say, hey, Angela, can we put a little God into the conversation? Or can I tell you this job that I'm being led to, and can we talk in those terms? I'm like, go for it, dude. So, but it's usually a very pragmatic thing. But NSYNC Resources is my company. Yeah.
Very good. Well, hey, Maddie, you were right that this is a giant conversation. We squeezed a few things in about an hour. So
300 and something million years.
Yeah, we'll revisit part of it. But what I love about the contribution that you make at A Life Designed is so many different perspectives, so many different personal evolutions, and we're ready to serve people where you are. You know, you are welcome here. So thanks everyone for joining today. And Brian, you have a final
I just want to end on one thing. So depending on how this all plays out, whether a bunch of truth comes out about aliens or truth comes out to the public about evil things our governments are doing, there really isn't anyone trained to help people with this stuff right now. So it's going to be coaches who can maybe step in and help people deal with the trauma of like, hey, aliens are real. Hey, they're more advanced than us, some of them. Hey, our government's been doing evil for like decades and we didn't even realize it. Like we were just completely ignorant. There's going to be people that have breakdowns over that kind of stuff.
Yes.
There's no therapist out there that's trained to handle that.
Right.
Hey, and Brian, also there are some things that could come out of government too, and therefore,
Sure, I'm not.
I think that, no, I
I'm-
know. I think
yeah.
people do get the good things out of government, like their life depends on the health care that they get from their government and the taxes we pay, right? Their life depends on
Sure.
it. My sister's life depends on it, for instance.
Sure.
But
I'm not saying
they
it's all
get
bad.
No, when they get threatened that might be breaking down, then they might need help too. You know, it's not just
There you go.
oh my gosh, the evil, but it's also, oh, the good that's been serving me. What if that goes away? Then what do I do? How do I step into my own empowerment around that too?
Yeah.
People are going to be super surprised when these things do unfold, because
Yes.
how do you think you would react if a 12-foot praying mantis walked up to you and asked you what the time was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Your
It's-
leader. We'll
even-
say, I could
Yeah.
refer you to Maddie. I don't
Yeah.
know if I could take you there, but let me hook you up with
Yeah.
Maddie. He could take you there.
I practiced for years and years and years and years and had so many different experiences. And then when it kind of, the nature of the experience got more radical, I was so surprised how when your reality shifts and changes in such a dramatic way, the heart feels like it's going to stop. You go into full-on panic mode, even though you prepared for the moment.
Yeah.
It's a shift of reality more than what you think you're able to handle. And this is going to be an issue as we move forward.
Well, there are
Yeah,
people
so
who can
that's-
help.
yep.
We're collecting them at A Life Design.
Yes.
People who can
So
help.
we have a whole team of people who can help with that. And people might also need help with, they start becoming more psychic and they're not used to it and it's freaking them out and they think they're going crazy. Or maybe they start seeing beings like ghosts or spirits or aliens, or I mean, who knows if you know, demons, or who knows.
Beings can make themselves look like anything they want to. And this is just another skill you have to, this is it. Just becoming psychic is just the first part of it. You're actually more vulnerable that way.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a big potential opportunity for coaches in this space to help people out, because there is no formal training on that stuff for how to help people with those kinds of things.
We're here to help. You're welcome here to, yep, you're welcome here. So thanks everybody for joining us today, and we'll see you all at the next one.
Great to see everyone. I love the conversation. Yep.